The tires screeched as I slammed the brakes. The GPS blaring, recalculating for the third time in 10 minutes. I was lost, somewhere on the foggy outskirts of Port Haven, Maine, and the Airbnb I'd booked was nowhere in sight. My phone battery blinked a desperate 3%, and panic clawed at my chest like a trapped animal. I'd driven 6 hours from Boston, chasing a weekend of solitude to clear my head after the breakup. My ex, Derek, had left me with nothing but a half-empty apartment and a heart full of jagged edges. The Airbnb cozy seaside cottage was supposed to be my escape, a place to stitch myself back together. But the address led me to a winding dirt road, swallowed by towering pines and a creeping mist that felt alive. I double-checked the booking, Pineview Cottage, 47, Harbor Lane. This had to be it. The mailbox, rusted and leaning like an old drunk. Read 47. I grabbed my duffel bag and stepped out into the chilly October air. The scent of salt and pine sharpened my lungs. The cottage looked like it belonged in a postcard. All weathered shingles and ivy crawling up the walls. A single light glowed from the porch, casting long shadows. I knocked, my breath visible in the dusk. No answer. I knocked again, harder, the sound echoing into the silence. Just as I turned to check my phone dead, now the door creaked open. "You must be Riley," a low voice said, warm but cautious. I spun around, nearly dropping my bag. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with chestnut hair that fell just above his eyes. His flannel shirt was rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms, and his hazel eyes studied me with a mix of curiosity and wariness. He looked like he'd stepped out of a lumberjack catalog, but there was a softness to him, a gentleness that made my pulse stutter. Yeah, Riley Parker," I said, my voice rough from hours of silence. "This is Pineview Cottage, right?" He frowned, glancing at a piece of paper in his hand. "I'm Caleb. Caleb Hayes. I think there's been a mix-up. I booked this place for the weekend." My stomach dropped. "What?" "No, I booked it. I've got the confirmation email." I fumbled for my phone, then cursed under my breath when I remembered it was dead. Caleb's frown deepened, but he stepped aside. "Come in. It's freezing out there. We'll figure this out." Inside, the cottage was warm, smelling of cedar and something faintly sweet, like cinnamon. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting a golden glow over the worn leather couch and a coffee table strewn with books. It was exactly what I'd imagined: cozy, isolated, perfect. Except for the stranger standing in the middle of it, looking as confused as I felt. "I don't get it," I said, setting my bag down. "I booked this place 2 weeks ago. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, seaside view. It's supposed to be mine." Caleb ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. "Same. Booked it last month. I needed a break." His voice caught on the last word, and for a moment, his guarded expression faltered, revealing something raw. I didn't press. I wasn't here to make friends. We stood there, 2 strangers in a standoff, the fire popping in the background. I pulled up the confirmation email on my laptop thankfully. It had a sliver of battery left and showed it to him. He showed me his. Identical bookings. Same dates. Same cottage. A double booking. Perfect. "Customer service is closed until morning," Caleb said, tossing his phone onto the couch. "I tried calling earlier. Got nothing but a robot telling me to email them." "Great," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "So what now?" "I'm not driving back to Boston tonight." Caleb hesitated, his eyes flickering to the window, where the fog pressed thick against the glass. "There's only 1 bedroom, but the couch pulls out. I can take it." I opened my mouth to argue, but the exhaustion hit me like a wave. 6 hours of driving, a dead phone, And now this. I didn't have the energy to fight. Fine, I said. But I'm not kicking you out of your bed. I'll take the couch. He shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. You're the guest. I insist. Something about the way he said it firm but kind made my chest tighten. I wasn't used to kindness. Not after Derek. I nodded, too tired to argue, and dropped onto the couch. Caleb disappeared into the kitchen, returning with 2 mugs of tea. He handed me one, his fingers brushing mine for a split second. The warmth of the mug was nothing compared to the heat that shot up my arm. Thanks, I mumbled, staring into the steam to avoid his gaze. So, Riley, he said, settling into an armchair across from me. What brings you to the middle of nowhere? I stiffened. I didn't want to talk about Derek, or the breakup, or the fact that I'd been unraveling for weeks. Just needed a break, I said, echoing his earlier words. You. He looked into his mug, his expression unreadable. Same. The silence stretched, heavy but not uncomfortable. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. I sipped my tea, the chamomile soothing my frayed nerves. Caleb was watching me, not in a creepy way, but like he was trying to figure me out. I wasn't sure I liked it. You're not from around here, are you? He asked. Boston, I said. You. Portland. The Oregon one. He smiled faintly, and I noticed the dimple in his left cheek. I flew out here for. Well, it doesn't matter. I raised an eyebrow but didn't push. We were strangers. After all, strangers stuck in a cottage together because of some glitch in the universe. I glanced at the clock 9:17 p.m. Too early to sleep. Too late to do anything else. So, I said, desperate to fill the silence. What do you do when you're not accidentally double-booking Airbnbs? He chuckled. A low, warm sound that made my stomach flip. I'm a carpenter. I build furniture. Mostly. Custom stuff. You. Graphic designer. I said. Logos. Websites. That kind of thing. Creative type. Huh. His eyes lit up, and for the first time, I noticed how green they were, flecked with gold. Bet you've got some cool stories. Not really, I said, looking away. I didn't want to get into it, not the late nights designing for clients who never paid on time. Not the way Derek used to call my work cute, like it was a hobby. It's just a job. Caleb nodded, like he understood more than I'd said. Sometimes a job's enough. We talked for a while. Safe topics, movies, music, the best dive bars in our respective cities. He had a dry sense of humor, and I found myself laughing more than I had in weeks. But there was something guarded about him, a wall I couldn't quite see past. I didn't mind. I had my own walls. By the time we finished our tea, the fire had died to embers, and the cottage felt smaller, warmer. Caleb stood, stretching, his shirt riding up just enough to reveal a sliver of toned stomach. I looked away, my face hot. I'll grab some blankets for the couch, he said. You take the bedroom. I wanted to argue, but my body ached, and the thought of a real bed was too tempting. Thanks, I said, standing. I owe you one. He waved it off. Just don't snore too loud. These walls are thin. I laughed, and for the first time that night, it felt real. The bedroom was small but cozy, with a quilted bedspread and a window overlooking the dark, restless ocean. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the sound of waves crashing in the distance. Caleb was out there, on the couch, probably asleep by now. I didn't know why I cared. Sleep didn't come easy. My mind kept replaying the day Derek's final words. Sharp as glass. The endless drive. Caleb's dimpled smile. I didn't want to think about him, but he was there, lingering like the scent of cedar in the air. I rolled over, burying my face in the pillow, willing myself to forget. Morning came too soon, gray light filtering through the curtains. I stumbled out of bed, my hair a mess, and found Caleb in the kitchen, flipping pancakes. The sight of him tousled hair, bare feet, humming softly felt like a punch to the gut. He looked so at home, so effortlessly himself, that I almost forgot we were strangers. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Hope you're hungry." I blinked, caught off guard. "You didn't have to do that." He shrugged, sliding a plate toward me. "Figured we could both use some fuel before we deal with Airbnb's mess." The pancakes were perfect, golden and fluffy, drizzled with maple syrup. We ate at the small kitchen table, the silence comfortable now. Outside, the fog had lifted, revealing a rocky coastline and a sky heavy with clouds. It was beautiful, in a stark, lonely way. "So," Caleb said, setting down his fork, "what's the plan? Fight to the death for the cottage?" I snorted. "Tempting, but I'm not great with bloodshed before coffee." He grinned, and that damn dimple appeared again. "Fair." I called Airbnb again. "They're looking into it, but it might take a day." Apparently, this place got listed twice by accident. "Great system," I muttered, stabbing a pancake. "So we're stuck here. Unless you want to camp in the woods." His eyes twinkled with mischief. "I'm game if you are." I rolled my eyes, but I was smiling. "Pass. I'll take the couch tonight. Though, fair's fair." He started to protest, but I held up a hand. "Non-negotiable." "Fine," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But I'm warning you, that couch is lumpy." We spent the morning trying to sort out the booking mess, but Airbnb's customer service was a nightmare of hold music and vague promises. By noon, we gave up and decided to make the best of it. Caleb suggested a walk along the beach, and I agreed, mostly because I couldn't stand the thought of staring at my laptop all day. The beach was deserted, the sand littered with driftwood and seaweed. The air was sharp, briny, and the waves roared like they had something to prove. Caleb walked beside me, hands in his pockets, his breath visible in the cold. He didn't say much, but his presence was steady, grounding. "You ever feel like you're running from something?" he asked suddenly, his voice low. I glanced at him, surprised. "All the time." He nodded, kicking a pebble into the surf. "Me too." I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. Instead, he picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. It bounced 4 times before sinking. I tried one, managing only 2 skips. He laughed, and the sound warmed me more than it should have. "Show off," I said, nudging his shoulder. "You're just out of practice," he teased, nudging me back. We walked until the cold numbed my fingers, then headed back to the cottage. Caleb built another fire, and we sat on the floor, sharing a bottle of cheap wine he'd found in the pantry. The conversation flowed easier now, stories of college pranks, bad first dates, dreams we'd abandoned. I told him about my art, how I used to paint before clients and deadlines took over. He talked about his woodworking, how he loved shaping something raw into something beautiful. "You should see my workshop," he said, his eyes bright. "It's a mess, but it's mine." "Maybe I will," I said, the wine loosening my tongue. "If we survive this weekend without killing each other." He laughed, and our eyes met, holding a beat too long. My heart thudded, and I looked away, pretending to study the fire. That night, I took the couch, as promised. It was lumpy, just like he'd said, but I didn't care. I lay there, listening to the creak of the floorboards as Caleb moved around in the bedroom, and wondered what the hell I was doing. I wasn't supposed to feel like this, not so soon. not with a stranger. But there was something about him, something that made me want to stay. By the second morning, the cottage felt less like a mistake and more like a refuge. The Airbnb issue was still unresolved, but I didn't mind as much. Caleb was easy to be around. Too easy. It scared me. We spent the day exploring Port Haven, a sleepy town with a single coffee shop and a bookstore that smelled of old paper. Caleb bought a dog-eared copy of Moby Dick, joking that he'd never finish it. I picked up a sketchpad, my fingers itching to draw for the first time in months. We wandered the docks, watching fishermen haul in their catches, their shouts mingling with the cries of gulls. Caleb's laughter was infectious, and I caught myself staring at him more than once, memorizing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Back at the cottage, I sketched by the fire while Caleb read, his long legs stretched out on the rug. The silence was comfortable, but there was an undercurrent, a tension I couldn't name. Every time our eyes met, my stomach flipped, and I hated myself for it. I wasn't ready for this, not after Derek, not after everything. "You're good," Caleb said, leaning over to look at my sketch. It was of the beach, the waves jagged and wild, with a figure in the distance that might have been him. "Thanks," I said, my face warm. "It's been a while." "Why'd you stop?" he asked, his voice soft. I hesitated, the truth too heavy. Life got in the way. He nodded, like he understood. "You should keep going. You've got something special." I looked at him, searching for a hint of mockery, but there was none. Just sincerity, raw and disarming. I swallowed hard, turning back to my sketch. That night, we cooked dinner together, spaghetti with a jar of sauce we found in the pantry. The kitchen was tiny, and we kept bumping into each other, laughing like kids. His hand brushed mine as we reached for the same spoon, and I froze, the air electric. He didn't pull away, and neither did I. For a moment, we just stood there, the pot simmering, the world shrinking to the space between us. "Sorry," he said, stepping back, his voice low. "It's fine," I said, too quickly. We ate on the porch, wrapped in blankets, the stars sharp above us. Caleb told me about his childhood in Oregon, about the father who never understood him, the mother who tried to bridge the gap. I told him about Boston, about growing up in a city that felt too big and too small at the same time. I didn't mention Derek, and he didn't ask. "You ever feel like you don't fit anywhere?" he asked, staring at the sky. "Every day," I admitted. He looked at me, his eyes searching. "You fit here." My breath caught, and I didn't know what to say. The moment stretched, fragile and heavy, until he stood, breaking the spell. "I'm gonna crash. Early start tomorrow." I nodded, my heart racing. "Night." I took the couch again, but sleep was impossible. I kept replaying his words, his touch, the way he looked at me. I was falling, and it terrified me. The next day, Airbnb finally called. The cottage was Minith'd refund Caleb and offer him another place nearby. He could leave by noon. I should have been relieved, but my chest ached at the thought of him going. "You don't have to leave," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. He looked at me, surprised. "You sure? I don't want to intrude." "You're not," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's nice having you here." He smiled, that dimple appearing, and I knew I was in trouble. "Okay, I'll stay." We spent the day hiking a trail behind the cottage, the path winding through pines and rocky cliffs. Caleb was ahead, his strides confident, pointing out birds and plants like a kid showing off his toys. I followed, my sketchpad tucked under my arm, capturing moments when he wasn't looking. The way he tilted his head when he laughed, the curve of his jaw in the sunlight. At the top of the trail, we found a lookout over the ocean, the the waves crashing far below. Caleb sat on a boulder, catching his breath, and I sat beside him, our shoulders brushing. The air was crisp, the world vast and quiet. "I'm glad I stayed," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Me too," I said, my heart pounding. He turned to me, his eyes soft but intense. "Riley, I don't know what this is, but I feel something. With you." My breath hitched. I wanted to say I felt it too, but fear choked me. Derek's voice echoed in my head. Too much. Riley. Too needy. Too broken. I stood, brushing dirt off my jeans. "We should head back." Caleb's face fell, but he nodded. "Yeah. Sure." The walk back was quiet, the easy camaraderie gone. I hated myself for shutting him out, but I didn't know how to let him in. That night, a storm rolled in, the wind howling like a living thing. The power flickered, then died, plunging the cottage into darkness. Caleb lit candles, their glow casting shadows on the walls. We sat on the floor, wrapped in blankets, the storm raging outside. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, but I wasn't. The storm, the darkness, the weight of my own fear was too much. I looked at him, his face soft in the candlelight, and something broke inside me. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice shaking. "Not of the storm. Of this. Us." He didn't look away. "Me too." I swallowed, my throat tight. I just got out of something. It was bad. I don't know if I can do this again. He moved closer, his hand resting on mine. "You don't have to. Not now. Not ever. But I'm here, Riley, if you want me to be." I looked into his eyes, and for the first time, I saw myself reflected, not broken, not needy, just me. I leaned in, my lips brushing his, tentative at first, then deeper, hungrier. He kissed me back, his hands cupping my face, and the world fell away. The kiss changed everything. It was like a dam breaking, all the tension and fear and longing spilling out. We pulled back, breathless, our foreheads pressed together. The storm roared outside, but in that moment, it was just us, the candlelight flickering across his face. "I didn't expect this," Caleb whispered, his thumb brushing my cheek. "Neither did I said, my voice raw. We didn't talk much after that. Words felt too small for what was happening. He took my hand, leading me to the bedroom, and we lay on the bed, fully clothed, his arm around me. His heartbeat was steady against my back, a rhythm that grounded me. For the first time in months, I felt safe. I woke to sunlight streaming through the window, the storm gone. Caleb was still there, his arm draped over me, his breath warm against my neck. I didn't move, afraid to break the moment. But eventually, he stirred, his eyes meeting mine. "Morning," he said, his voice husky. "Morning," I replied, my heart racing. We didn't talk about the kiss. Not yet. Instead, we made coffee and sat on the porch, watching the waves. The air was crisp. The world knew. I wanted to stay in that moment forever, but reality was creeping in. Tomorrow, we'd have to leave. Back to Boston. Back to Portland. Back to lives that didn't include each other. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Caleb looked at me, his eyes steady. "Whatever we want." I wanted to believe it was that simple, but doubt gnawed at me. Long distance, fresh off a breakup, two strangers who barely knew each other, it was a recipe for disaster. But when he took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine, I wanted to try. We spent the day together, exploring more of Port Haven, sharing stories we hadn't told before. Caleb talked about coming out to his family, how his father had walked out of the room, how his mother had cried but held him. I told him about Derek, how he'd made me feel small, how I'd lost myself trying to be what he wanted. "You're enough," Caleb said, his voice fierce. "You're more than enough." I blinked back tears, the words sinking deep. For the first time, I believed them. That night, we cooked again, laughing as we burned the garlic bread. We ate by candlelight, the power still out, and it felt like a date, like something real. After dinner, we sat on the couch, his head resting on my shoulder. I traced the lines of his hand, memorizing the calluses, the warmth. "I don't want this to end," I said, my voice breaking. "It doesn't have to," he said, lifting his head to look at me. "We can figure it out. Together." I kissed him again, slower this time, savoring every second. When we pulled back, he smiled, and I knew I was falling hard, fast, and without a safety net. The last day came too fast. We packed in silence, the weight of leaving heavy between us. The cottage felt like ours now, every corner filled with memories, laughter in the kitchen, kisses by candlelight, quiet moments on the porch. I didn't want to go back to Boston, to an empty apartment and a life that felt like a shadow. Caleb was quieter too, his usual ease replaced by something pensive. We walked the beach one last time, the wind sharp against our faces. He stopped, picking up a shell and turning it over in his hands. "I've never felt like this," he said, his voice low. "Not this fast. Not this real." I swallowed, my throat tight. "Me neither." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "What if we mess this up?" "Then we mess it up," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "But I'd rather try and fail than walk away." He smiled, the tension easing from his shoulders. "Okay, let's try." We exchanged numbers, promising to call, to visit, to make it work. It wasn't a plan, not really, but it was enough for now. We drove back to the cottage, his hand resting on my knee, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time, hope. That night, we lay together again, his arms around me, his breath steady. I didn't sleep much, too aware of his warmth, his presence. I thought about the future, Portland, Boston, the miles between us. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. In the morning, we stood on the porch, bags packed, the cottage quiet behind us. Caleb pulled me into a hug, his chin resting on my head. "This isn't goodbye," he said. "I know," I said, my voice muffled against his chest. We drove away separately, him to the airport, me to Boston. The road stretched out, lonely and endless. But my phone buzzed with a text from Caleb, "Miss you already." I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. Maybe I'd picked the wrong Airbnb. Or maybe, just maybe, I'd picked the right one. Back in Boston, the world felt different. My apartment was the same, bare walls, half-empty fridge, but I wasn't. Caleb and I texted constantly, his messages a lifeline in the gray routine of my days. We FaceTimed at night, his face grainy but perfect, his laugh filling the emptiness. A month later, I flew to Portland. His workshop was exactly as he described, cluttered, sawdust everywhere, but alive with his creations. He showed me a table he'd built, the wood smooth under my fingers, and I saw him in every curve, every detail. We spent the weekend together, cooking, laughing, kissing until we were breathless. It wasn't perfect, there were arguments, doubts, the weight of distance, but it was real. I started painting again, inspired by him, by us. My sketches filled with his face, the lines of his hands, the way he looked at me like I was enough. He visited Boston, and we walked the Freedom Trail, his hand in mine, the city brighter than I'd ever seen it. One night, months later, we lay in my bed, the city humming outside. "I love you," he said, his voice steady. Certain. I froze, the words I'd been afraid to say rising in my throat. I love you too, I whispered, and it felt like coming home. The Airbnb mix-up was a glitch, a mistake, but it gave me Caleb. It gave me a chance to heal, to love, to be myself again. Life wasn't perfect, distance was hard, and we both had scars, but we were building something, piece by piece, like one of his tables. And for the first time, I believed it would last.